Welcome back to the Runner's Digest podcast. My name is Mac Dewar, and today we're going to be talking about running the New York City Marathon. So about 3 weeks ago, I ran the New York City Marathon with New Balance, and today I just want to sort of talk over that experience, how it came to be, how training went, and sort of what went into getting to New York, running the race. What was that whole experience like? So I'm going to start all the way back at the beginning with my initial contact with New Balance. So I guess a lot of people have sort of asked me, how did the opportunity arise? So I got asked to run the marathon about 3 months ago. It was the middle of August, 15th of August, I think. And maybe about 4 or 5 weeks before that, I had just had a conversation with their new marketing manager. Basically, they just wanted to see what I was up to, see what I was about, because they hadn't met me before, but they knew who I was. So they're sort of just feeling me out, basically. And from that point, I got a message on Instagram from Jess, their marketing manager. She said, "We have an opportunity we want to discuss with you. Do you have time this afternoon to have a chat?" I said yes, and they sprung that on me. So obviously I said yes, and quickly messaged my coach and said, we've got to pivot from running the Melbourne Half Marathon, which was what we were working towards, to running arguably the largest marathon major in the world in New York City. So what did training look like? We had about 11 weeks until race day. So 9 of those weeks were going to make up the bulk of the training, and the last 2 were obviously a taper where you're not really making much benefit. You're just sort of keeping your body ticking over, really. And so the approach was, basically, I'd found out I was going to be running New York City, and I had just come off being like really sick. I don't know what it was. It wasn't COVID, but I basically spent 4 or 5 days in bed, and I was cooked. So that first week back was like super easy, and then we sort of had 8 weeks to like really crank it up. And honestly, training went perfectly well. For those 8 weeks, we probably capped out at about 70 kilometers, which I've definitely done more mileage before for marathon trainings. Like for Christchurch, I probably got up to about 85. But I think because of that conduced window that we had, it made sense to not push the mileage too high and basically just make sure that I got to the start line feeling as fresh as possible, which is what we did. And also touching on that in terms of training shoes, like what I wore to train in during this time. Obviously, I was wearing New Balance. They had sent me a few pairs, the 1080 V13, which is their new sort of like everyday trainer, the Propel V4, which is sort of like a budget-friendly trainer, and then the Supercomp trainer and the Supercomp Elite V3. And so basically I did a lot of my mileage in the New Balance 1080 with the V13, which is an incredible shoe. And I think it's a big upgrade from their V12. And I also did a lot of my sort of like longer, harder sessions in the Supercomp trainer. And then I did like a little bit of speed work in the Supercomp Elite. So anyway, that sort of covers off training. We capped out at about 70 kilometers a week. I was obviously trying to do some strength work in there as well. But we basically got to the start line in New York feeling relatively fresh, apart from one small thing, which I'll touch on later. So moving on to goals. So earlier in the year, in April, I'd run a 3:28 marathon in Christchurch. I was actually aiming for something under 3:20, but I ran a 3:28. And so moving into New York, we set the goal of trying to run a 3:30, which would be pretty close to obviously a marathon PB, but New York City is a much tougher course overall. A lot more undulating, a lot more bridges. Obviously, Christchurch is just completely flat. And so A goal, perfectly good day, everything goes to plan, body doesn't cramp up and all that sort of stuff. We're going to run a 3:30. B goal, anything under 3:45. Which I think it was fair, but we were more definitely looking towards that like 3:30 range than we were that upper range. So travel, obviously from New Zealand now, it's actually quite good. You can go Auckland to New York City direct, fly straight into JFK. It's like a 16 or 17 hour flight depending on the wind. But for me, we made things a little bit more difficult. And I went and attended an event in Melbourne with Up There Athletics and New Balance. And basically that was like a wear test with so the people of Melbourne, basically. And it also gave me the opportunity to meet the other 4 Aussie runners. So it wasn't just me going with New Balance. They were sending people from all around the world. Luckily, I was lucky to be the only Kiwi going, but they were also sending 4 Aussie runners. So I got the chance to meet them before we actually ended up in New York, which was cool because we got to like hang out. We had dinner afterwards, and we were also on like a little bit of a panel where Riley Wolf from Hunter Athletics, he mediated it, asked us a few questions about sort of our running journey and our run clubs and whatnot. And so travel obviously a little bit more difficult. So I traveled to Melbourne on the Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon we had the Up There Athletics and New Balance event. On the Monday night I flew from Melbourne to LA. And we were flying Qantas. I get on this flight and I'm talking to this guy next to me. He's probably in his 80s, and his wife is sitting next to him. She's like probably a little bit younger. She's maybe in her like mid 50s, early 60s, and seems like a relatively normal dude. Says he sort of bounces between California and Melbourne, has houses in both, whatever. It comes to dinner time. I'm sitting there eating my dinner. So they bring out the dinner first, and then they bring out the drinks. And he asks for a white wine. And the flight attendant says, no, sorry, like we can't give you a white wine. We've been told you're on medication. Rah. And this guy goes off. He's like, no, I'm not. Who told you that? Where'd you get that information from? I'm an 80-year-old man. I can have a white wine. And it like just loses shit for the next 20 minutes. And it turns out that his wife had told the flight attendants to not serve him any alcohol. I don't know if he was on medication or not, but she had told him that to not serve him alcohol. And then one of the flight attendants is asked, like, your wife has told us not to serve you any alcohol. And then he kind of goes off at her a little bit, like, why'd you tell them that? Why would you do that? What's going on? Whatever. And I'm just sitting there with my headphones on, in transparency mode, just listening to this all unfold. There's like 4 flight attendants around us. They're telling them to calm down, whatever. Anyway, he wants to get up because he wants to go to the toilet. He's sitting in the middle and I'm sitting on the aisle seat. So I get out the way, and I basically sit next to this girl who's booked a row so she can sleep until he comes back. But when he comes back, he sits in my seat because he's pissed off at his wife and he doesn't want to sit next to his wife. So I finish eating my dinner. I sort of like looking around for like 15 minutes, waiting to see if a flight attendant will come down and like sort it out. Doesn't happen. I go to the back of the plane. I'm like, look, that guy's like, that guy in 51, he's sitting in my seat. Can you either ask him to like move back into his seat, or can you move me? Whatever. They go away, come back 2 minutes later, and they're like, we've got a whole row for you. We'll grab all your stuff. You just go down there and you just settle in. Perfect. So thank you to the angry 80-year-old dude that sat next to me on the flight from Melbourne to LA, because it meant that I could sleep on the plane, because that's like a 14-hour flight. Land in LA, got like a 3-hour layover in LA to JFK. It was relatively straightforward, actually. And then I had a driver pick me up from JFK Airport. This was on the Tuesday morning. And he drove me to the hotel I was staying at in Times Square. And so I unpacked my stuff. My parents, lucky for me, they were joining me in New York. They were coming to watch me race, which was very, very nice of them to do. Super grateful that they could come out and be there to support me. And And so I went and hung out with them for the morning. We got some bagels and some coffee, and then I basically went back to the room and chilled for the rest of the day, and sort of try and get myself relatively acclimatized as much as I could. And so basically the first couple of days in New York were just chilling. Wednesday morning went for like a little shakeout, was feeling pretty good. Thursday morning went for another wee shakeout, and definitely had a super poor sleep Wednesday night leading into Thursday. So I was up quite early. I think jet lag had really caught up to me at that stage. But we decided to get up early, sort of just push through and just push through to that night basically, and hopefully get a good night's sleep. But on the Thursday night we all went to bib pickup. So I went and got my bib from the expo. That place is crazy. It's like a runner's heaven. And I would love to know the figures of how much merchandise New Balance sold. Obviously with them being one of like the main partners, they had all the merchandise rights, I guess. And I've never seen like so much merch in my entire life. Like I probably spent like 600 New Zealand dollars on New York City branded gear. On the Friday we had the Run Your Way event. They had a panel, and then Action Bronson was playing, and so that's wild. So Action Bronson's like one of the he's like one of the leads in the Run Your Way campaign, and so is Chito Vera, who's a UFC fighter. So got a photo with Chito Vera, got a photo with Action Bronson, also got to watch Action Bronson play. He just played like a small set of 3 or 4 songs. Definitely probably spent like, on the Thursday, I think I did like 30,000 steps, like spent way too much time on my feet. So Friday, we were definitely more conscious of trying to stay off our feet as much as possible. And then, so when Saturday rolled around, we had a shakeout run with Tim Rossi from the Lost Boys Track Club, which was epic. So good to meet that dude. He's lovely. So he took us for a wee jog around Central Park, and then he bought us coffee. How many of us were there? 7? There was 7 of us. And he paid $45 for 7 coffees, which is like 70, nearly like $10 a coffee. Pretty sure like more expensive than $10 a coffee in New Zealand. It was crazy. But we were also there with Rabbit Wolf Creative, who were doing a piece for Tempo Journal. So on that Saturday, we were basically running around Central Park. They were getting some extra footage of us, asking us some interview questions and whatnot. And then after that, basically went back to the hotel room, and from like 1 p.m. until maybe even earlier than that, from like 12 p.m. until I went to bed, I was literally just lying on bed, like watching the F1, watching YouTube, just not doing anything. So I ordered some Uber Eats that night for dinner because I didn't want to, I just didn't want to spend any more time on my feet basically. And I ordered what I thought was an epic deal. It was like a 2-for-1 sushi deal on Uber Eats. Wasn't super expensive. It arrives. It's like the smallest portion. It's like the smallest double portion of sushi I've ever seen. So that was really disappointing. But I couldn't be bothered doing anything else. So I think I had some spare bagel and something else in the room. So I just ate that instead of trying to get some more dinner food. Because at this time I was like pretty close to bed. So I was like, I'll just do this and go to bed, and that will be fine. Got to sleep at probably about 8:15 on that Saturday night, with the race day being on Sunday. And luckily for us, New York City were ending daylight saving. So our clocks went back an hour. Back an hour? Yeah, our clocks went back an hour. So we got an extra hour of sleep. So I basically got like 9 hours of broken sleep. I did wake up like 2 or 3 times, but was able to get back to sleep relatively quickly. So that worked out perfectly well in our favor. And I wonder if that happens it must happen every single year when they run the marathon, because it's the same weekend. So that was epic. And so race day morning, I've got a pretty good understanding of what I need to do on race day morning, and it's basically like make sure that I'm getting in enough calories at the right time, enough carbohydrates, enough electrolytes, not consuming too much water that I need to go to the toilet multiple times. So I've sort of got that down to a fine art. So it's basically like a bagel and a banana in the morning, a Morton 320 drink mix, a couple tabs of Precision Hydration electrolytes, and then on the bus it was like, because I didn't start racing until 9:50 a.m. and I'd been up since 4, so there was a bit of time to kill. So on the bus I had half a bagel or another whole bagel, and then while I was waiting in the New Balance tent, I had an LCM bar and another bagel. So I had plenty of carbs that morning, and obviously like a lot of time, probably more time to digest than what you'd usually have on a race day. So woke up at 4, met the rest of the crew in the lobby at 5, and then we made our way to the VIP buses. And we had a police escort from Times Square all the way into Staten Island over the Verrazano. So that made that trip super easy for us. We arrive, go through security. There's a VIP New Balance tent for us to go in and like hang out. And basically inside the tent is, you've got Gatorade, water, food, private toilets. There's even like a charging station for your phone. And then obviously the rest of the room's like filled with people who are affiliated with New Balance or have been sent there from New Balance. So there's some really cool people in that room. There was the Believe in the Run guys, a girl called Mallory who's like a New York City runner who I follow on Instagram and TikTok. I had a wee chat to her. I met Ross, who's like the editor of Hypebeast. So yeah, it was pretty cool in there. So made our way to the corral. They play the national anthem. They fire the cannon, and then they start playing Frank Sinatra, and basically you're running. And so the first mile of the race, you're running over the Verrazano Bridge, which takes you from Staten Island to Brooklyn. And this is where like the most elevation in the entire course is. It's like 40 or 50 meters of elevation over a mile-long period. And unfortunately, where our corral started, we were on the lower level of the Verrazano. We weren't on the top level, so we didn't get the best view. But I'm not sure if that lower level has the same amount of elevation as it does on the top level. I feel like it's seemed relatively flat in comparison to what I thought it was going to be. But you do sort of end up in a different area. You sort of end up on this like lower motorway, and then you sort of have to run up an off bridge, an off ramp up into Brooklyn, and so maybe that would make up the extra elevation. But during that time, watch GPSs all over the place said that I ran a 6:36 first kilometer, and I assumed that it was going to be bad, but I didn't realize it was going to be that bad. I didn't realize it was going to be out by like a minute 30, and anyway, I continued to run. I passed the mile marker, checked my overall time, and it was like 8 minutes, which I think is like, 8 minute pace is like roughly where I need to be to hit my goal. So we were on track through the first mile, which was ideal. Coming off that lower level of the bridge onto the motorway, the sun was out, and it was definitely hotter than what it had been in New York the past few days. They're obviously like going into I think they're obviously currently in autumn. They're going into winter, so some of the mornings have been quite cold. This was probably already 12, 13 degrees, and the sun was out, which doesn't seem that hot, but definitely makes a difference, I reckon, considering, we're from New Zealand and it's relatively cold here all the time. So early on, I realized my quad, my right quad, it was definitely tight, and this is something that I sort of prefaced earlier, as I had a small niggle, and it was like my right quad was tight, and I went to see my physio and she worked on it. And it just felt tight really on during the race, and I wasn't sure if it was just like general tightness or it sort of felt like it was going to cramp. So I made sure to hit, I started with salt tabs really early at the first aid station, basically just to like, if it was going to be cramp, I'm just going to get out in front of it as early as I can, get a salt tab in. And if it cramps, it cramps, but at least I tried to avoid the cramp, basically. We cruised through the first half of the race. Brooklyn was absolutely nuts. I mean, the whole race is absolutely nuts. There's like people as far as the eye can see. Everyone is yelling at you. Everyone's got a sign. Someone's got a cowbell. Like there's something going on everywhere apart from the bridges, where it's like the only place you get relief. First half, I think I ran a 1:45:18, so we're like a little bit off pace, but overall feeling really good. Fueling strategy was a gel every 6 miles, every 6 kilometers, or 30 minutes. And then I basically did salt tabs every 6K for the first half. So I did 3 salt tabs in that time. And then we were also hitting every single aid station, getting Gatorade in. Just because I just wanted there to be, like, if I got cramp, at least I knew that I'd tried my hardest to avoid it, basically, and obviously like continue to get in carbs so I wouldn't bonk or anything like that. Mile 16, the Queensborough Bridge. Like, when I asked anyone who'd run the race before, like, what is your advice for me? It was just be ready for the Queensborough Bridge. And this thing's like, I think it's maybe 2 miles long. It's got quite a bit of elevation, maybe 40 or 45 meters, and it comes at a time in the race where you're still so far from the finish. You're still like 16 kilometers from the finish. And all you're trying to do at this point is like continue to settle in until you hit 32 Ks. And then, you've only got 10K to go. So the plan of attack was run any bridge off feel. Don't worry about looking at your watch. Just run it off feel. Make sure you're not exerting too much energy, building up too much lactic acid, and then you can just open your legs on the downhill. But I definitely struggled up the Verrazano, but we got through it, and then we made it onto 5th Ave. And 5th Ave is what I would call a false flat. Like, it's definitely uphill a lot of the way. But what you can't see when there's so many people around you, so many runners, so many spectators, is you can't really see that incline. So you think that it's flat, but really you're probably putting in more effort than what you would if it was actually flat. And so by the time I got to, I think it's like the last little bridge that takes you into the Bronx, once I got over that, I was just fried. This is probably 32, 33 Ks in. Things were starting to cramp. My left hamstring was starting to cramp. So at that point, I decided to pull back the pace because I knew that if I ran any faster, it was going to catch, and then I'd have to stop and stretch it out, and I'd probably lose more time by doing that than I would by slowing down my pace. So I slowed down my pace, and I sort of knew at that point there's no way I was hitting 3:30 because I had to run a negative split, basically, like a negative half, to be able to run that 3:30 time, as I was a little bit off pace already. So I was, I knew that goal had gone, and at this point, it's obviously just like a get through the race sort of thing. 37 Ks, we're pretty close to entering Central Park, and I've never really felt like this before in a race where I feel like I'm going to, like, I feel lightheaded or I feel like I'm going to pass out. But there was a point where I was like, I just needed to verbally say out loud 1, 2, 3, 4 as my feet hit the ground, because I was feeling like that. But I didn't want to stop. I've never stopped during a race, and I wasn't going to stop now. So slowed down the pace again, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after, a couple of minutes, it went away and we were back to normal. But we were definitely through Struggle Street all the way through Central Park. And it wasn't until I sort of rounded Columbus Circle to go up to the finish line, I saw that 400 meters to go, and I just had that like little jolt of energy where I was like, right, time to just like finish strong. You can do it. Like, you only got 400 meters to go. What have you got to lose? I take off, and quads and calves cramp all simultaneously. And so what was meant to be like a really strong finish ended up being like a bit of a hobble. 200 meters to go. I just hear my dad. He just yells, "Macca!" And I turn to my left. He holds up like the New Zealand flag. I was like, holy shit, that's epic. And then I finish as strong as possible, basically. Get over the finish line, and just this like major sense of relief comes over me. I think there'd been a lot of like mental pressure in the lead up to the race, more so that I'd probably been putting on myself. But there's just a sense of relief when I crossed that finish line. It was like, all of that work that I'd put in over those, 10, 11 weeks had paid off. So we ended up running a 30. We ended up running a 3:39.26, which fell beneath that 3:45 goal. I think I would have been disappointed if I had gone over 3:40. But after talking to my coach earlier this week, actually, he's like, you got to take into account, obviously New York is a really hard course. And so you've got to take into account that, you're running 5:12s on that course, but that relative pace on a flat course is probably more like a 4:50, which is around 3:24, 3:25 pace, I think. And so I didn't really think about that at the time. I was actually just so stoked to be finished. Like I said, just like a lot of mental load, a lot of pressure. And you're there because of someone else, and you want to do yourself proud. You're the only New Zealander. You want to, you want to do your country proud, and you want to do the brand proud. And New Balance, New Balance New Zealand had taken a big, I don't want to say gamble, but a big risk in me, right? Because it's like, of all the people they could have chosen New Zealand, of all the people in the running space, they chose me. And I wanted to make sure that, I could do my part, run a good race, and be able to tell a good story, and, pay it back to them. Because at the end of the day, they facilitated this whole thing. They paid for all of it, accommodation, flights, everything. So again, I'll come back to the word relief, because that's what it felt like to cross the finish line. And then after a while, it's just like pure joy, like you've literally just run the biggest marathon in the world in, personally, my favorite city, with 50,000 other people. Your parents got to watch you cross the finish line, and it's just like, it's something you don't really think is going to happen until it does. Yeah, it was. It's crazy just thinking about it. I got the medal. The medal still hangs on my bed frame. Still keep it real close. Still close to me. I need to get it engraved. But so you cross the finish line at New York, and obviously logistics wise and safety wise, they've got to be pretty tight with the whole thing. But getting out of the park is like a nightmare, or trying to get to your family after the race is a nightmare. You've just run 42 kilometers. Everyone's completely exhausted. Like, people are just lining the fence on the floor, looking absolutely gassed. But to get to my parents, you sort of exit the park at maybe 68th Street, and you've got to walk 5 blocks down to 63rd, 62nd to be able to get out. And I caught up with the Tempo Journal guys, or the Rabbit Wolf guys, Ryan specifically, maybe halfway down, heading towards Columbus Circle. It's just this, they took these photos of me. Actually, Stephen was there too. They took these photos of me, and it's just a sea of Walking Dead orange all around me. Everyone's wearing these orange ponchos. They're all completely exhausted. No one's legs work properly. Everyone's walking funny. And yeah, it's just it's a bit of an unreal thing to happen, really. I'm sure there's a better way that they can figure out how to get people out of there more efficiently without us having to walk so far. Because I ended up just walking from the finish line all the way to my hotel in Times Square, because it wasn't worth doing anything else, getting on the Getting on the subway would have been crazy busy. And so in theory, I basically ran from Staten Island all the way back to my hotel in Times Square, which when you think about it is pretty nuts. So anyway, yeah, that's my New York City Marathon story. Obviously, I want to say a big shout out to New Balance New Zealand and the marketing team there. You know who you are. I don't have to say your names. You know who you are. Yeah, obviously, just like a once in a lifetime experience. You guys have been so incredible to work with, and I look forward to continuing the partnership moving forward. And lastly, just a big thank you to everyone who's supported the content over the last 12 months, basically. I plan on bringing the podcast back for weekly episodes, as well as like weekly YouTube videos. There's obviously been so much support on TikTok and Instagram, and I can't thank you guys enough for that, because basically without your support, even leading up to this situation, what would you call it? Leading up to this, God, mind's gone blank. Just leading up to this event with New Balance, like I wouldn't have had that exposure or that platform without the support from you guys. So I appreciate you greatly. But yeah, that's me for this one. In the next episode, I'm most likely going to be talking about my goals moving into 2024, because we're basically full gas, no brakes. How can I get better, faster, stronger in the running space? How can I continue to up the content level and quality? So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.